California mother is suing a charter school alleging a bullying incident left her son with severe brain damage. The woman says school officials did nothing to stop it. Nikki Batiste is here with this difficult story. Nikki, the allegations here are harrowing. What happened exactly?
Well, Tony, this is a terrible story that every parent dreads. Their child bullied at school. Now, one California mother is taking legal action to bring about change. She spoke with our Los Angeles affiliate KCBS and didn't want to show her face or name to protect her son's identity. She says she wants accountability.
That child that I dropped off at 7:30 that morning, he is not the same anymore.
This mother says school officials at Animo Westside Charter Middle School in Los Angeles didn't do enough to protect her son from a school bully.
That hurts because that's all I have. Could have been prevented, only if someone cared.
It was January of 2018. School surveillance cameras show a small boy getting off the bus when he's approached by a much larger boy who punches him and allegedly puts him in a chokehold. At one point, a staff member walks by but doesn't intervene. According to the lawsuit, the boy allegedly lost consciousness twice. He is eventually helped inside, where staff members realize what's going on, bringing him to the main office and laying him down on the floor while they call his mother. When she finally arrived, she says no one had called 911.
A son is literally laying there still in the middle of the office floor, completely black and blue.
Ben Mycelis is the attorney representing the mother and her son.
The school district has seen the video. The fact that they can watch that video and not so much offer an apology is really, really, really disgusting.
According to the complaint, the boy suffered permanent brain and spine damage as well as post-traumatic sleep disorder. In a statement, the organization Green Dot, which runs the charter school, writes, "We take seriously the safety of all of our students and quickly address bullying of any kind on our campuses. We promptly and thoroughly investigate any complaint and take appropriate corrective action." The boy's mother says she wants an apology and can't believe the bully was never expelled.
I think across the board there should be discipline, and I think that that can include termination.
The lawsuit is asking for unspecified damages, and the mother in her interview says she's going after the school, not the boy. The bully was actually at her son's birthday party a few weeks before. She spoke to his mother. His brother had recently passed away. He'd been having anger issues, and so she really feels that the school should have stepped in here.
The school, or there are about 8 bystanders there.
Yes.
Other kids should know you can step in. You don't have to stand there and watch it.
The mother sounded remarkably calm to me. I would be outraged. I mean, disgusting is the right word.
And sickening. It's it's very tough. And the kid, there's such a big difference between the size of the two and the fact, I'm so angry too at the staff member that kept walking. I'm very impressed by the mother that has sympathy for the bully of her son.
You wonder, never mind expelled, you wonder if the kid should be arrested.
Yes. I mean, she has incredible grace, but, everyone talk to your kids about bullying. Step in if you see something.
Don't be a bystander.
And right now he's still in school, though. The bully is still in the school.
As far as we know, yes.
This story from Philadelphia, where a night-long standoff that paralyzed a Philadelphia neighborhood is over after the man accused of wounding 6 police officers and shooting repeatedly at others surrendered overnight. His name, Maurice Hill, 36 years old. He walked out of his home where he had barricaded himself, holding his hands in the air.
Police say Hill opened fire when officers came to the house with a warrant. 2 officers and 3 hostages were trapped inside for about 5 hours until a SWAT team rescued them. CTM national correspondent Jerika Duncan is at the scene in Philadelphia. Jerika, what do we know about the accused gunman?
We know that the accused gunman has a criminal history, an extensive criminal history that includes several gun possession charges. Now, as for those 6 officers that were wounded, they were released from the hospital and are said to be in good spirits this morning. You take a look at the scene behind me right now. Police still gathering evidence. It is quiet. It is calm. But hours ago, neighbors here described it as a war zone. Sounds of gunfire terrorized this neighborhood in Philadelphia for hours.
I got an officer shot. I got an officer shot. Give me SWAT ASAP. Long gun ASAP.
Officers serving a narcotics warrant at a home around 4:30 p.m. yesterday were ambushed by a gunman barricading himself inside.
The shooter fired multiple rounds. Officers returned fire, many of whom had to escaped through windows and doors to get from a barrage of bullets.
6 officers were shot, including one who was grazed by a bullet in the head.
One of the cops was running past. He had blood all on his head.
Heavily armed police officers, dozens of squad cars, and SWAT teams swarmed the area.
Damn! SWAT! All SWAT!
Police, along with the shooter's lawyer, were trying to communicate with the suspect for hours, urging him to surrender and free hostages.
SWAT was able to successfully extract the 2 police officers that were trapped upstairs, as well as 3 prisoners.
But as darkness began to fall, the siege didn't let up.
I'm still reading off.
More than 7 hours later, the gunman surrendered with the help of his lawyer, Shaka Johnson.
I've never known him to possess the traits that would have a person shooting at police officers or having a whole community under siege.
The 6 officers wounded left the hospital as their fellow officers lined up to salute them. Philadelphia's mayor used the standoff to call for gun control.
Whether it's our 6 officers who were shot or it's some 15, 17, 20-year-old kid on the streets of Philadelphia who gets shot with guns that shouldn't be in people's hands. And it's aggravating, it's saddening.
More than 30 officers discharged their weapons during this shootout. The alleged gunman was taken to Temple University Hospital, where he was treated for tear gas exposure. He's expected to be arraigned, facing multiple charges that include 6 counts of attempted murder.
New York City's police commissioner says there is a mental health emergency in his department after the 9th suicide by an officer this year. Officer Robert Echeverria took his own life on Wednesday. This came a day after another officer's suicide. Jeff Begays has extensively reported on policing in America and is investigating this crisis. Jeff, what do we know?
Good morning, Tony. When we spoke to officers for last week's Policing in America series, off camera, they consistently mentioned depression and PTSD among officers and the need for more help. So how serious is the crisis? Consider this. A 2018 study found that nationally, officers are now more likely to die from suicide than in the line of duty.
My wife has been my rock. It's been hard.
Doug Budney's son, Nick, was a New York City police officer for 14 years. He took his own life last year.
We don't know why Nick did what he did. A lot of it had to do with the stress of the work, things that he's seen.
The NYPD has seen 9 deaths by suicide this year alone, 7 since June. Last year, there were 4 total. Police Commissioner James O'Neill.
It's beyond a challenge, it's a crisis. You think that, okay, this is going to be the last one, and last night got a phone call, and I just it just almost knocked me down. It just took the wind right out of me. I just, what the hell's going on here?
At least 124 officers nationwide have taken their lives this year. In 2017, at least 140 officers died by suicide, compared to 129 who died in the line of duty. Departments in Chicago, Arizona, and New York are adding more counselors to deal with the crisis.
Just think about the cumulative trauma that police officers are exposed to each and every day, and how does that manifest itself? We need to change the culture. We need to make sure that our police officers have access to mental health care so they can keep themselves well and do the job that they want to do. We just have to make sure that people know the help is out there.
And the NYPD is offering counseling and new ways for officers to seek help anonymously. But a study finds that only about 3 to 5% of police departments nationwide have the resources that they need for suicide prevention. President Trump recently signed a bill to give funding for police suicide prevention efforts.
Jeff, it's really striking.
That's what I was going to say, too.
That line of duty deaths now are lower than suicide.
Yeah, isn't that a stunning number? It just shows you the scope of the problem across the country. But, I have to say, a lot of these police chiefs, they're having a hard time dealing with this. How do you counteract this, and how do you get officers on the beat to admit that they're having these problems and that they're potentially in distress?
I hope they find a way.
Out of that scare at a mall in Houston, sending panicked crowds running into the streets. People are especially on edge in the wake of those mass shootings last week. And Lindsay Davis is here with more. And Lindsay, police are searching for the suspect who caused this.
That's right. They certainly are. Good morning to you, Michael. Houston police say this time the suspect has not been located, but they have numerous witnesses and are continuing to investigate. They are treating this as a terroristic threat and desperately want to find the person behind this pandemonium.
They're shooting! Go! Mass panic at a busy Houston mall. Shoppers sprinting into oncoming traffic.
Oh my God.
Trying to escape what they believed was an active shooter, but in reality, just the latest example of a nation on edge. Police say it all started when a masked man jumped onto a table at the food court, threatening to take his own life, then dropped an unidentified object on the ground, causing mass panic. The stampede caused 2 minor injuries. Authorities are now searching for the suspect and labeling the incident as a terrorist threat. After back-to-back mass shootings, communities around the country are restless. Last week in Times Square, a loud popping sound caused hundreds to flee the area. In reality, it was a motorcycle backfiring.
And it was like pretty much a stampede of people just sprinting as fast as they could.
The FBI is also on high alert with concerns of copycat attacks. Domestic violence extremists inspired by the recent mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton committing their own acts of terror. Late last week, this 20-year-old was arrested at this Missouri Walmart after entering the store carrying a loaded military-style rifle and wearing body armor, sparking mayhem. Police say he wanted to test the boundaries of his Second Amendment rights.
Police say a 16-year-old boy and his mother both suffered minor injuries in that mall scare. The mother was reportedly stepped on several times on her back as she was trying to help her son. Authorities say the suspect is described as a white male in his teens or early 20s.
We began with very sad news from California, where a traffic stop turned into a gun battle that killed a highway patrol officer last night. Witnesses say that a man grabbed a rifle from his pickup truck in Riverside and just started shooting while the officer was filling out paperwork to impound the vehicle.
The gunman was also killed. 2 other officers were wounded. As Carter Evans reports, passers-by were caught up in the gunfire.
There's a shooting right now. Happening right now.
Gabriela Mendoza watched in horror as a gunman dressed in black holding what appears to be an assault-style rifle began firing at officers just off Interstate 215.
The man was just shooting just to shoot. He looked like he had experience with it.
Video shows a wounded officer being rushed away in a police car during the shootout. The officer who had conducted the traffic stop, Andre Moy, was airlifted to the hospital. He died from his injuries.
Unbelievable. This is so unbelievable. Who does this kind of stuff?
Drivers along the busy freeway were caught in the crossfire, including Jennifer Moctezuma, who was driving her 6-year-old twins home when a bullet hit her car.
It hit straight in the middle of my windshield, missing my head and my 2 children that were in the back seat.
Retired Marine Charles Childress was in the car behind them.
Heard the kids screaming.
And quickly pulled the family to safety.
Ricochet bullets were still firing, so I took the kids out and her out, and I put them behind the engine block of her car for protection.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that Chuck came to save us because or else we still would have been in the car ducked and not knowing what to do. He's honestly a hero.
Hours later, officers lined the streets to salute Officer Moy for his nearly 3 years on the force.
Turning overseas this morning, Australian police are praising bystanders who helped end a deadly stabbing spree in Sydney. A man is accused of stabbing at least 2 people and trying to attack others in the city's financial district overnight. 1 woman is dead. Police have not determined a motive, but say the suspect has a history of mental illness. Lachlan Kennedy from our partner Network 10 in Australia is at the crime scene.
This is usually one of the busiest intersections in the heart of Sydney City, and today it was in lockdown this afternoon when a man wearing a balaclava and holding a large knife marched down one of the streets before attacking a woman who was sitting at a bar, slashing her in the back before running up this street and jumping on the fronts of cars at these traffic lights. It was then when members of the public saw him, they decided to give chase. They ran after him down another street, and when they eventually got him, they held him there until police arrived by using chairs from a coffee shop and a milk crate, placing it on his head until police got there. Now, it was only after that man was arrested, a 21-year-old from Western Sydney, that police sadly discovered a second crime scene. A 21-year-old woman stabbed to death in a nearby apartment block. The motives for this attack are unknown, but police say they did find a USB stick near the man. On it, there was information about mass killing events, including the Christchurch massacre, although they say at this stage, while the man does have a known history of mental illness, he has no known known links to terrorism.
As many of you know, the U.S. has withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and now plans to deploy intermediate range missiles to at least 3 countries, including Japan and Australia. China's warning that the U.S. that this will be a bad move and will respond with countermeasures if the U.S. doesn't retreat. RT's Ashley Banks is joining us live in studio with more to this story. Ashley?
That's right, Manila. Another fight between the U.S. and China is heating up. This time it's over missiles. The U.S. has officially withdrawn from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, also known as the INF, and now plans to place weapons across the Asia Pacific. Washington says one of its main reasons for leaving the treaty is because Russia violated the treaty by developing banned weapons. However, experts say the U.S. has wanted to deploy intermediate range missiles across the Asia Pacific for a while now in order to counter China's growing missile arsenal. The U.S. is looking to place missiles in Japan, South Korea, and Australia. China stands in opposition to this move and states although it has a large stock of intermediate range missiles, those missiles are unable to reach the U.S. homeland. Therefore, the U.S. has no cause for concern. However, China says if U.S. missiles were placed across the Asia Pacific, they'd be in striking distance of mainland China. State Department Undersecretary for Arms Control and International Security Affairs, Andrea Thompson, said it's ultimately each government's decision to host U.S. missiles. She added, quote, any decision made in the region will be done in consultation with our allies. This is not a U.S. unilateral decision. However, China says if the U.S. or any of the above-mentioned countries follows through with this, it will retaliate. China says it will pursue countermeasures against the U.S. and any country that hosts U.S. missiles. These measures could include anything from an economic boycott to sanctions. Take a look at what Fu Kong, Director General of the Chinese Foreign Ministry's Department of Arms Control, had to say.
We call on the U.S. to exercise restraint. And I also want to make one point absolutely clear, that China will not stand idly by and will be forced to take countermeasures should the U.S. deploy intermediate-range ground-based missiles in this part of the world.
U.S. and Russia plan to hold talks on a nuclear arms limitation pact after the current agreement expires in 2021. Thompson hopes Beijing will join in on the talks, stating, quote, part of being a responsible actor, you need to have transparency and responsibility. So we encourage China to come to the table as well. The world demands it. That's what responsible nations do. However, at this time, China states it has no interest in entering any negotiations with the U.S. and Russia. Kong says China has exercised restraint in its nuclear capabilities and doesn't believe it's fair for China to have to participate in an arms reduction agreement. Experts say the U.S. leaving the INF has placed the future of arms control agreements in a bad place.
Commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Hossein Salami, says that Hezbollah has acquired capabilities in Syria that allow it to destroy Israel alone. Now, he's also weighing in on the tensions between Iran and Washington, adding that negotiating with the U.S. is not the way to resolve problems and that talking to Washington officials will only increase pressure and demands on the regime to, quote, make us surrender.
Now to a developing story out of the disputed area of Kashmir. Now, the Pakistani military claims 3 of their troops were killed in an exchange with gunfire with India along the border. 5 Indian soldiers were also killed. However, India is denying the report. Tensions have soared between the 2 nuclear-armed countries as both India and Pakistan have claims to the area.
US President Donald Trump has largely brushed off North Korea's recent short-range missile launches, saying they don't violate the understanding he reached with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. While Trump seems relatively unconcerned, security experts say the launches clearly demonstrate the regime's increased ability to attack not only South Korea, but also the United States. Oh Seong with the details.
North Korea's latest missile tests are a clear sign of the regime's upgraded attack capabilities. This is according to the Washington Post, which on Thursday quoted various defense experts who raised concern about the regime's test firing of short-range missiles over the last 4 months. The launches included at least 2 new types of ballistic missiles, including the road-mobile KN-23. According to the Post, these missiles appear to threaten South Korea's missile defense system, with the missile fired last Tuesday flying at least 450 kilometers. Vipin Narang, a professor of political science at MIT, also pointed out that the missiles are short solid fuel projectiles, which means they can be deployed and fired at short notice. They also fly at lower altitudes, making them harder to intercept with South Korea's current anti-missile systems such as THAAD. Experts told the Daily that North Korea may not be able to miniaturize a nuclear warhead to mount onto a missile like the KN-23 just yet. But even conventional warheads could be devastating if they target South Korea's nuclear power plants. Pyongyang said its missile test last Saturday included a new weapon that was different from previous weapon systems, but did not specify what it was. Observers say it's too soon to be certain about the latest weapon, but what's for sure is that the recent series of missile tests not only demonstrate the North's intentions to boost its military capabilities, but also help bolster Kim Jong-un's reputation at home as a powerful leader.
Also in Russia, a loud premiere took place over the weekend at the Army International Games. The general public was shown for the first time the Dagger hypersonic missile system. Now, this is a missile that can accelerate to hypersonic speeds and hit large targets both on land and at sea. Yulia Shapovalova has the story.
These are some unique shots. The two high-altitude MiG-31 fighters with the Kinzhal missile system are wowing the crowds in the Ryazan region of Russia. Before that moment, the military had not showcased their secret development in action. Invulnerable and able to travel 10 times faster than the speed of sound, the Kinzhal or Dagger missiles are already on alert in Russia. Experts call the Kinzhal a unique system and an unprecedented achievement in military history, which has no rivals in the world. Super maneuverability and extreme speed put it out of reach of air defense systems, and coupled with the MiG-31 allows it to reach any target within a radius of 2,000 kilometers. President Putin called the Kinzhal the ideal weapon, guaranteed of overcoming all existing and even future air defense and missile defense systems. The Kinzhal has been in service in one of the southern districts of Russia since December 1st, 2017. What makes it so unique is the speed of delivery of the rocket by air to the drop-off point, along with the capabilities of the rocket itself, which can maneuver during all parts of the flight path until it reaches its target. The experts noted that the new system makes all the existing U.S. missile defense systems such as THAAD, Patriot and Aegis ineffective.
Now, finally tonight, this could have been really bad. We have footage of a NATO fighter jet approaching a plane carrying Russia's defense minister. Okay, that's right there, the NATO plane. You're looking at it. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's plane was approached. And now, see that plane coming into the picture right there? That's the Russian fighter jet that's pushing it away. So what you see, and we'll loop this again, is the NATO plane. He's shadowing the plane that's carrying the Russian defense minister, right? See right there at the front? That's the Russian defense minister's plane. Now, if we go back to the other picture, you're going to see, now there, that's the Russian plane, and he's simply protecting the plane. But in the first picture, there, let's go back to that one. All right, that is the NATO plane, and he's right there, right next to the Russian plane with the defense minister. So the Russian fighter jet has to come in and literally shoo him away. It's a remarkable moment. Dangerous world.
Pet owners across the country are being warned about a potentially deadly algae. 3 dogs in North Carolina died last week after swimming in a pond that had blooms of blue-green algae. CTM consumer investigative correspondent Anna Werner is here with the dangers of this growing threat. Anna?
Yeah, good morning. The blooms of this harmful algae are widespread, and they've been shutting down beaches and lakes across the Gulf Coast this summer. Health effects can range from skin rashes to organ failure, a threat many pet owners don't know about until it's too late.
Abby, Izzy, and Harpo meant the world to their owners, Denise Mintz and Melissa Martin.
We did everything together. When we took one, we took 3.
But after taking their dogs to play at a Wilmington, North Carolina pond, the joy shattered in just minutes.
Denise brought the 2 little dogs upstairs to get their bath next, and she started yelling for me that something was wrong with Abby, one of the Westies.
The dogs started to have seizures. They rushed them to the vet. Less than 5 hours later, all 3 dogs were dead.
They just needed to cross that rainbow bridge together as the trio that they were.
The animals were poisoned by something lurking in the water, a microscopic bacteria called blue-green algae. It mostly infests waters when the weather is warm and releases toxins that can cause liver damage, respiratory paralysis, and organ failure, among other deadly conditions.
Come on, Fina!
In recent weeks, several dogs have been poisoned across the South. This Australian shepherd named Fina died less than an hour after ingesting toxic algae in the Guadalupe River outside Austin. In Marietta, Georgia, this border collie, Aria, suffered the same heartbreaking fate.
You know your pets, and you know when something's not right. I just didn't think it was this not right.
Some of this is almost invisible, right, Anna? So what do you look out for if you're a dog owner?
You know, the blue-green algae, they say, can sometimes range from brown to red in color. It can have an odor. Now, they say to protect yourself and your pets, you should avoid bodies of water that look discolored and have foam or scum on the surface. If your pet has been exposed, rinse them with tap water as soon as possible. Take them to the vet immediately. But, you know, in some of these stories, they've said that it takes less than an hour.
These women are inconsolable. Suddenly and without warning, their beloved dogs died after they took a playful dip in this lake.
And I just laid on the ground with him and told him how sorry I was and that I loved him and I wouldn't have never gone if I knew.
All their dogs, Ollie, Harper, and Coda, were in good health, happy and full of energy. They also shared another thing in common. They died within hours of playing and frolicking at this lake in Austin, Texas, Lady Bird Lake, named in honor of the former First Lady of the United States, Lady Bird Johnson.
I heard him kind of struggling in the back seat and I just said, you know, you're gonna be okay, I love you. Like I couldn't even fathom that something was gonna happen the way it did. And then shortly after they come in and tell me, I'm so sorry, but your baby died.
Veterinarian Mark Cotnam's clinic treated Harper.
They treated the patient as best they could, as aggressively as possible, but he still expired.
So what is it about that lake that proved to be so deadly to the dogs? It turns out the pets were exposed to a deadly and toxic algae growth. The toxins are especially commonplace in still water during the hot summer months. Now, veterinarians are warning everyone to keep their dogs out of lakes and ponds. The toxins are found in blue-green algae. It can also sicken humans, but rarely.
It's dangerous for people too, yes, and people are usually not as careless as dogs about drinking brackish algae-covered water, so it doesn't happen as often.
I mean, you can kind of see like algae up
At Lady Bird Lake, the women who didn't know each other until they bonded over the shared loss of their dogs are pleased to see signs now posted warning of the danger. The lake has been closed to the public, but none of that will bring their beloved pets back.
They're your best friend, they're constantly with you, so the grieving process has been really difficult.
Peppy Moore grew up in rural Vermont. Until recently, her life was filled with riding horses, playing tennis, and generally enjoying the outdoors. But in 2015, she got a diagnosis that changed everything. A blood test confirmed she had Lyme disease. By then, the disease was at an advanced stage, and antibiotics did little to help.
It got to the point where I literally was hobbling around. I couldn't make it from the garage to my flower beds. Had to stop playing tennis. I couldn't walk my dog, couldn't bike. It literally stopped me in my tracks.
According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Lyme disease, which is transmitted by deer tick bite, is the fastest growing vector-borne infectious disease in the U.S. The CDC says the number of reported tick-borne diseases, the majority of which were Lyme, more than doubled between 2004 and 2013.
14 states, including Vermont, have traditionally accounted for the vast majority of reported cases of Lyme disease. But a danger that was once largely confined to the northeast of the country and the Midwest is now spreading to other parts of the United States.
There are now reported cases of Lyme disease in all 50 states.
I never saw a tick on me. I never saw a tick bite.
Part of the problem is that Lyme disease is often hard to detect and diagnose.
A lot of times people don't realize they've been bitten by a tick because the ticks can be so small. The nymphal ticks can be as small as a poppy seed or the period at the end of a sentence.
If detected early, antibiotics are usually very effective. But if the disease persists undetected for a long time, the treatment can be much more complicated.
And I've done a lot of detoxing, hyperbaric pressure chamber, IVs, you name it. I've been at it.
A Lyme vaccine exists for dogs, but currently there is none for humans. The FDA has fast-tracked a vaccine that is currently undergoing clinical trials, but it could be years before it hits the market. For many communities grappling with high rates of Lyme disease, a vaccine can't come fast enough.
Learning new details this morning about a lethal and widespread outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. One person has died and possibly dozens have become ill from the bacteria, which can cause a severe form of pneumonia. All were guests at the Sheraton Atlanta Hotel. Mark Strassman is outside the hotel as the first lawsuit is set to be filed today. Mark, good morning.
Good morning. This hotel is still closed, as it has been since mid-July, when everyone had to be evacuated. Since then, at least a dozen people have tested positive for Legionnaires, but hundreds more may have been exposed. By the time guests arrived at the Sheraton Atlanta on July 15th, 49-year-old Camille Garrett was already dead. An autopsy showed she had coronary issues and Legionnaire's disease. Garrett went to a conference at the Sheraton a week before she died. Germany Greer did too.
I couldn't sleep, didn't want to eat, couldn't drink because everything was horrible. I was delirious.
Did you know your own name?
I got to the point where I didn't.
Greer's a 67-year-old photographer. He was hired to document the same hotel conference. His fever hit 104.5. Atlanta's Piedmont Hospital kept him for 4 days.
The doctor said, we have had 2 other cases already before yours.
Legionnaire's disease is a severe form of pneumonia. People get sick inhaling microscopic water droplets containing the Legionella bacteria. It is not contagious.
This is one of those bugs that lives out in the environment amongst us. And on occasion, it gets into a man-made water system, contaminates it, and it can be very hard to get rid of when that happens.
The CDC says 1 in 10 Legionnaire's victims will die. Georgia health officials are now investigating 75 Legionnaire cases, 12 confirmed and 63 probable. All of them were Sheraton Atlanta guests. In a statement, the hotel offered its deepest sympathies to all those affected, adding, a thorough cleaning of the hotel's entire water distribution system has been completed, including scrubbing and chlorination.
Apologies won't do it in this situation.
Attorney Chris Stewart represents 40 Sheraton guests with confirmed or presumptive cases of Legionnaires. He says other guests scattered around the country may also have the disease.
This is a massive problem nationwide. People don't know they're sick yet with Legionnaire's disease. I mean, literally, we get a new client every single day.
The potential population of exposed people
is in the hundreds.
The Sheraton Atlanta says it won't reopen until test results show the threat is over. Germany Greer, sick for 5 weeks, says he's still only 65% healthy.
This is Twilight Zone. This is completely different than anything I've ever experienced in my life.
Health officials looking at when people may have been exposed here are looking at a timeline that lasts more than a month. Anthony, this hotel will remain closed at least through this Wednesday.
So scary how easily that spread.
Doctors say in about 30 years, millions of people will die from simple infections because the drugs we've depended on to kill these infections will simply no longer work. In fact, Lori Johnson reports we're already starting to see it.
Imagine a child dying from a simple scrape that becomes infected. Sound far-fetched?
Shame on us if we wait for there to be bodies in the street before we step up to the plate and really begin to address this situation.
For the last 70 years, antibiotics have done a great job killing our worst bacterial infections like E. coli, staph, even the plague. But now we're seeing stronger, more resilient strains of bacteria that antibiotics cannot kill. They're called superbugs. An alarming CDC report reveals these drug-resistant superbugs infect around 2 million Americans each year, killing 23,000. At the top of the list, C. diff, a bacterial infection that targets the intestinal tract and kills 14,000 people a year. That's followed by drug-resistant gonorrhea, an infection making up about 1/3 of the cases of this sexually transmitted disease. and CRE, a respiratory bacteria infecting 9,000 hospital patients a year, killing half of them. Pitts says bacteria build resistance to antibiotics because doctors overprescribe them. Antibiotics only work against bacterial infections. The vast majority of patients seen by doctors have viral infections, a major difference in the medical world. Still, patients often push for a cure, and doctors usually prescribe an antibiotic even though it isn't often necessary.
And when a patient comes in, or a mother or a dad brings in a child with an earache and the child is crying and screaming, and the parent wants a prescription, and they know that antibiotics just broadly might be of value. Doctor thinks to herself, I know that an antibiotic is not going to help this child, but it will give the parent what they want, and it's not going to do any harm. And the fact is, it does tremendous harm.
Another reason for this liberal prescription policy is because it can take too long to determine the type of infection.
Right now, unfortunately, the diagnostics still require a day or 2 or 3, to properly understand if it is in fact a bacteria that can be treated with an antibiotic. So a lot of doctors will say, well, prophylactically, I'm going to give you an antibiotic.
People with superbugs often receive what's known as antibiotics of last resort, which carry devastating side effects.
Where not only are you nauseous all the time, but you really can't function. You're in bed, you're completely weak. It's like having the worst flu you've ever had for a very long time, hoping that it works. Because a lot of times people who develop these antibiotic resistant bacteria don't get treated one time. Doctors have to continually experiment with more and more potent antibiotics as a cocktail to find out what works.
These antibiotics severely disrupt the immune system, making the patient vulnerable to future infections.
So if you allow kind of more mild antibiotics to become ineffective, and even those impact gut flora, and you move into more potent antibiotics, it's going to impact it even more, and that's worse.
Superbugs are often contracted where you think you'd be most protected, hospitals.
People going into hospitals for an appendectomy, for a relatively minor operation, otherwise completely healthy, and walking out with a very tough bacteria, hospital-acquired infection that requires extremely potent antibiotics with very nasty side effects, and sometimes they get cured and sometimes they don't.